Hello, it's Cryptolyze. I hope you are well this Friday, January 5, 2024. We're meeting today to talk crypto, to talk BTC, to obviously talk ETF, and it starts right away. Today is supposed to be a big day. At least that's what we're starting to see little by little. We will start with a tweet from Goku, who explains to us that in fact we perhaps have a source close to the BTC ETF file who would tell us that tomorrow we will have validation. In any case, we are waiting for what we call big day, a big day for ETFs, spot BTC. Is this going to be validation? Is this going to be a refusal? In any case, this is what journalist Jacqueline Minilek tells us, and several other sources are starting to tell us that in fact we should have this Friday an answer, or in any case sufficient elements to be able to determine whether or not we have an answer. Well, we're not going to kid ourselves. That doesn't mean that it's already been since the beginning of the week, since the beginning of the year, or even the end of the previous year, where we are told that it's going to be tomorrow, that it is on the razor's edge, that it is soon, and we are starting to have more and more analyses which tell us that yes, it will be right away, no, it will not be right away sequel, etc., etc. It doesn't matter all that much. In any case, what is sure and certain is that we are trying to create volatility. The fact of having this influx of news creates uncertainty, creates excitement, and behind it will create volatility, regardless of the type of response we get. In any case, what is also certain is that we have very strong pressure on the SEC, but will this pressure necessarily lead to validation? That's still a big question. As usual, we have analysts who are for it and analysts who are against it. What is sure and certain is that it is getting closer. It is getting so close that when we had the bearish breakout already at the beginning of the week, we had the return of buy the deep, which was absolutely everywhere, and which is very interesting because it is precisely a typology that we have when we have a preparation for a sell-off. So, once again, we pay very close attention to this typology, to this titrology, and to all the articles, even if it means taking a little step back from to everything that is happening, especially since we have other analysts nearby. I like it because we have Raoul Pal, a former Goldman Sachs executive. There you go, okay, Goldman Sachs executive. There are already a bunch of them, and I think there are some good ones as well as some very, very bad ones. So we don't already know what he was doing in life, nor how many years ago he left Goldman Sachs. What is he doing now, in short? We have an analysis out of nowhere which explains to us that there is a 60 chance that we are in a normal cycle, a 20 chance that everything happens upstream, therefore implying a cycle which is perhaps more short as planned and which would start today, and we have a 20 chance that he will be in a hypercycle, which is more like between 2012 and 2013 or even 2015, okay? So, to see if yes or not. In short, in all cases, the person who is being analyzed, for me, still remains relatively, there you go. We don't know who it is. So, for me, there is little interest in giving that. But if I could show you once again that we push news to give news, that does not necessarily have a big interest once again. On the other hand, why am I showing you this? Because there is also an interest, it prompted me to think, which is, I have often spoken to you about the notion of selling the news, but I have not told you how to recognize if we were really in a bull run continued to this news, and if we really had an influx of liquidity, how would we see it? And that will also be the goal of this technical analysis today. Another little news we have is the regulatory pressure from the SEC, which is still very present behind following the validation of the indictments around Terra Lab and Terraform with the UST, therefore the dollar which was used in Terra Luna. The occurrence he wants to use it, which was validated in relation to the UST against the BUSD or even against Coinbase, then something which is totally different. I recall that the UST was an algorithmic stablecoin which was validated against the Luna and against a collateral part while the BUSD was exchanged against one and was backed against one. Okay, it's two different things, and the BUSD was Paxos, so still a big company, and which is centralized while the UST is not, was absolutely not. I think that there is a part of amalgamation which is trying to be carried out now, although it is not intended. BUSD still has much more of the head of a stablecoin and not of a securities compared at UST. So the fact that we're pressing on it in this way mainly means that the SEC is really trying to force regulation around securities and cryptos. And I think that's what we're going to see in year 2024 on anything that isn't BTC. And maybe not even Ethereum, but that's still a bit between the two. In terms of figures, we had rather good figures yesterday. We had an increase in service PMI above the expected. We have an oil stock, which is rather okay. The same unemployment registration, which is down therefore, which is rather positive too. Agricultural, the same in decline, rather positive too. So here we are, really good in fact overall, except that when we look a little bit at the figures, we see that we continue to decline. Very interesting, yesterday we had a bearish breakout, but we did not close below the lowest, which should have been the case if we really started a bearish breakout. And today we are still in not a level of activity while the U.S. market is not yet open, okay? We had a big opening wick of acceleration, was swallowed, and we break bearish. If we have this bearish close below this level, we will have an indication to look for the next target for me, which is 4,600, in which we have a large support zone we find here, this first top, this second top, which was carried out in which we will certainly touch, and then structure ourselves either upwards or make a small sidestep to touch this Fibonacci level, and then leave again. We will see as we go along, but in any case for me we remain in a short-term downward trend, which is also valid for the Nasdaq. First level 16,000 Nasdaq, in which we will ask ourselves questions. Second level we will look for 15,500, in which we will have yes or no reactions at the level of price, but we are in a breathing phase, which is rather logical for the start of the year, and in which we also see it at the level of the VIX, which is the volatility index of the S&P 500, which is a hedging option in relation to the evolution of the S&P 500. And the higher we go in the price level, the more it is demanded, and the more it is demanded, the more investors we have who have a hedging option for a possible fall. And we see that we are starting to have a momentum that is being created, so that means that yes, potentially we could have a reacceleration here on a reacceleration of the VIX. That means that investors are waiting to have precisely a break at the level of the various American indices. On the BTC side, then we had a bullish reacceleration. We will look at it later in short time frame, but it will be interesting to come back to this notion of hypercycle. Let's admit we arrive at a validation of the BTC ETFs. This validation leads to a contribution of liquidity which is much more substantial, that we do not have this notion of selling the news, or in any case very short term, and that we immediately begin a supercycle from mid-January, from the beginning of February in fact. So implied a massive liquidity provision on BTC, a massive purchase of BTC which is made at the market, and in which we have a set of green candles which are starting to structure themselves upwards, okay? Which are rather impulsive, especially the first, perhaps a consolidation. And then we start from this style. Can we consider that here we are in a form of supercycle? And what do we need to be able to determine this? What do we need to say that we are starting a bull run in relation to the validation of ETFs? Firstly, first thing is that we will have to have volume and impetus and momentum. That means we want to see, what we have seen here, continually. Okay, this is something that will be done in this style. Remember what we saw in this part A or in this part A. That's exactly what we want to have, okay, on the previous cycle, 2020-2021C. This is what we saw and this is what we want. We want to see candles that do 7, 8, 9 for several weeks in a row before having a breather, and then starting again on a set of candles that reaccelerates, and we want to break the ATH in any case. As long as we don't break the ATH, as long as we don't actually have this bullish momentum, we are not in a bull run and liquidity injection phase. So this is where the liquidity injection is very important. This term is not for nothing. It is because we will want to have liquidity coming in. So for the liquidity that comes in, it's several factors. One, the amount of stablecoin that leaves. When we take a step back here, we are in weekly mode. We see that this was the top bull run level on 2022 before the fall of Terra Luna. Okay, we had the breakout of Terra Luna effective. And here we would have the reacceleration. So we see that we are really at a beginning phase, okay? We are still relatively far from the plateaus of 147 billion. So we must reaccelerate. We must have an injection of liquidity in terms of liquidity. And we must also have a correlation between this injection of liquidity, which is the set of stable coins, divided by Ethereum and BTC. We could even put total market cap. I think that I have below, here it is. Total market cap, in which we would have a valuation, therefore something which would push upwards, implying that we have more liquidity than price valuation, and therefore we would have a symptom which would potentially resemble what we experienced during this phase. Okay? Addition of liquidity, distillation of this liquidity into the different assets, addition of liquidity, distillation of the liquidity into the different assets. This is what we want to see in order to have a course that grows. So for me, it's really two vectors, as long as we don't have these two vectors. So one, addition of liquidity. Two, transfer of this liquidity to crypto assets. And at the same time, we could add the third that I have for you given earlier. It is volume and upward volatility with impulse candles really to be able to go upwards. There. These are really the three things that will determine whether we start with momentum or not. Then, are we in the notion of a super cycle? The notion of a super cycle implies that we could have had big bear markets, we would have had small bear markets, etc. To achieve this, in all cases, we must remove the last swords of Damocles. The last swords of Damocles are the swords of regulation and regulation, okay? As long as it is present, we will always, in fact, have the possibility of crashing, and we will always have the possibility of interdiction. And always a form of uncertainty. And second thing, we will always have crypto, and I think that unfortunately it will take a long time before we no longer have it, is that we can have very big hacks, just as we can also have very big scams like FTX or Terra Luna, or at least projects like Terra Luna, which can burst in flight. Once again, with greater regulation, we could have avoided Terra Luna. I'm not necessarily sure that it could have been avoided. And so Terra Luna, as a reminder, is that. All right? This is really the big bearish breakout. So for me, yes, we can reach a supercycle, but is it still too early? Maybe. We will already see with the regulations and the potential influx of liquidity from institutions. At the short-term level, we can clearly see that we are still maintaining the oblique with this retracement that we have had. Breathing. If we really look at the short term, we can clearly see that we took a big breath. It's retested the previous top, and we filled a large part of imbalance. We still have a part of imbalance that is unfilled. In that respect, it's rather classic. For the moment, we could have a new reattack to be able to structure ourselves here. And there I will watch what happens. This means that if here, for example, I have a small distribution, I might have something to accompany a retest of a new oblique, so something that would be located in these areas, or even if we are ever really in a notion of range, I would go and look for the bottom of the range with 41,500 potentially, to go and retest this wick that we carried out, because for me, I think that it will be retested before validation of the ETFs. Unless the validation of the effect happens today and we are taken by surprise, because clearly the movement itself will have to take several days, several hours in fact, to be done so. For me here, we could do it today, and then potentially retest at the end of the day, or even the beginning of next week and then leave again. But once again, it will depend on the news that will fall. Always pay close attention to the news. Don't forget the volatility that we could have is very strong back and forth. It is not because we had a bearish breakout that we did not then have after a comeback, which hurt us very badly for those who were in shorts and who was levered. We had a lot of liquidation of those who were leveraged, and here we had a lot of liquidation once again of those who were trying to buy back this leveraged dep. Don't forget that while we're going to have a lot of volatility, it won't be the time to pull out your big levers. On order flow, we don't necessarily see much. We can clearly see that the funding rate is decreasing. I predicted it to you in particular yesterday. I told you that it's rather classic. We even see that open interest in both markets are totally flat, okay? So we have no one who is buying, which is happening here, so people are in position and are simply waiting for validation. I think we will not have open interest until we will not have no news. Once again, we are careful. As I explained to you at the start of the video, we have a lot of news coming, and we must not overreact to what is happening, because in all cases the market is manipulated. We have no longer had any doubts for a very long time. But that does not prevent us from reminding ourselves of it regularly. We can clearly see the fuse that was there to actually recover all the SLs that were positioned here. All the long ones which were positioned here is in the process of preparing. One, the liquidation of the longs. Second, liquidation of the longs. We liquidated part of the shorters. We did not go for the large part above 46,000, in which we still have a lot of people on the top who had been left. Well, I think we will look for that when we have validation of the ETFs, the fuse risks being quite violent in relation to that. And what we are looking at, it's that for me, we still have a little bit of length that are present, which were built on precisely the acceleration that we had, and the repurchase, in fact, of this wick. So the repurchase of this wick is, hop, we are going to position ourselves here, talk. It is the repurchase of the wick that was done there, okay? The fact of seeing this strand there which has been bought, it is in fact the long ones which are positioned in this area there, which is rather normal to have in fact this acceleration to actually get this top there. So this is exactly what we are playing, to see if we have the bearish breakout quickly enough, or if we simply push directly to the moon with news that potentially brings us into a super cycle, and that we don't have any sell the news. although it still remains my preferred scenario because we're not going to hide the fact that it still has the smell. It tastes. It looks like it. We've already seen that from many times. Why would it be different again? Maybe yes, it will be different. In any case, the important thing is not to be right. It's to be prepared to be wrong. Never forget that. And besides, speaking of preparation, if you are not sufficiently prepared, if you want to be really prepared, don't forget that you have an investment and trading guide which is available. 30 concise pages. For explain to you when to buy and when to sell. It's in the description and in the comments. And we'll see you later at 13:30 for a video on AVAX, Avalanche's crypto. Before leaving, don't forget to leave me a little like and a comment. It supports the channel and above all, it makes me happy. And I'll see you later. If you want to train and really enjoy bull running, it's simple. There is perfect, complete, free training available. It's through an educational journey that teaches you everything about blockchain, crypto, investment, technical analysis, and trading. All this for free in comments and descriptions. You have exercises, multiple choice questions, modules, videos, guides, everything to support you in your progress.